All right, now we're recording, I think. Yes, perfect. Okay. Well, welcome to the weekly group support call for Foundations. Again, today, that's what I'm going to be talking about is restoring trust in God when life shakes the trust that we thought we had. And hopefully, the deeper we get into this, the more you're going to realize, like, this is for me. This is for me, right? And you can relate with what I'm going to be sharing today. Let me keep letting everybody in. All right. So first of all is this, we do still have the buy one, get one free offer going. And so I don't know, Miranda and I really don't know exactly what inventory is still in the the warehouse. And so go in there, try to order it. Hopefully it's still there. And the other thing to remember is you can't buy one clean and one digest or whatever. You need to buy two of the exact same thing to get that buy one, get one free offer. So make sure you go to store.resetwithmiranda.com, put that code in there, reset BOGO at checkout. And again, you must have two of the same item in the cart for that BOGO offer to apply. The other thing is we had our sleep contest sleep and energy, the light contest last week. And so for those that entered that, I'm going to do the wheel in just a moment. And hopefully you found Time with Rudy last week, that video, extremely informational, educational, and applicable, however you say that. Everybody says it different. And able to just take what you learn there and apply it to your life so you get better sleep, better rest, and more energy in your world. So let's jump to the wheel of blessing, not fortune, wheel of blessing. All right, now Elvia, I don't know if Elvia's here. She is pretty much taken over and wins pretty much every week. So she is on here. Everybody's on here 5 times that competed. And so let's spin the wheel and let's see what we got going. Here we go. Who's it going to be? 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 How? How does that happen? Okay, Elvia, congratulations. You are the owner of the contest from now on. So congratulations on winning, and excited to run these contests every week. Super fun. We have a lot of fun with it. Hopefully it's a lot of fun for you all as well. And so let me jump into what I want to talk to you about today. But before I do, does anybody really want to share a win that you had this week, whether it was a non-scale victory or just maybe in reference to the call from last week with light and what you learned and how you applied it and how it made a difference in your week this past week? Anybody want to share? Anyone? Okay. All right. Janine.
I figured I'd start. The PowerPoint presentation last week was, I think, kind of like explode your brain kind of information. It was a lot of information. I think to absorb, and I had a call with Miranda yesterday, and I said it's almost like you needed a concept map to put it all together. Between the cortisol and the nighttime vision and the daytime light, and how one thing impacts the other, and it was a lot of information. It was extremely useful, but I kind of was like losing it by the time we got to the end of the presentation. So a lot of good stuff. A couple of people on school mentioned questions about the salt lamps and the UV light blocking glasses, and switching over your iPad and your iPhone to the nighttime settings. So there was a lot of good discussion on the school site. And a couple of other people chimed in and said, their piece as to what they're doing. So if anybody else wants to jump in and say anything about that. It was a good presentation. It was just a lot to to sort of
Sure.
take in all at the same time.
Yeah,
But
when Rudy's amazing. I've not met him, in person, but I've obviously been on the calls with Miranda and Rudy, and yeah, I mean, this is when it is your life's work, right?
yeah,
You learn a lot about it, you know a lot about it, and again, I love, and obviously, Jenny, I know you're an educator, you're an intellectual, like we love to lifelong learning, like that's our calling,
yeah,
that's our goal, like never enough, right? If I may learn about this, but I want to learn a little bit more, and so to have those people in our life, and I'm married to one of them, who just is a master at her craft, and so it's a constant learning experience for me. And as you all know, anybody in mastery or even in foundations, like she knows, right? She knows what she's talking about, and it comes from that place of just love and
no,
admiration for all of us to share
yep,
what she knows, right? So we're better.
yep.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to share from last week, or just whatever, just a win this week, or something that you really have learned and applied that's made a big impact on you this week? All right. Well, let's jump into today's call. Let me get it back up here. All right. So, restoring trust in God when life shakes the trust we thought we had. Now, my story um, is growing up as a preacher's kid. Like, church is all I've ever known. It has been my life. I feel like over 50 years of living, there's been very, very few Sundays that I've missed, or very few services that I've missed, and maybe I've missed more than I think I have. But overall, it feels like I've lived in the church. And in a few minutes, I'll tell a couple stories of why this right here not only means so much to me, why it applies so much to me as well. Um, and so let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like God has let you down? Like, have you ever felt that way? Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. Maybe you've never had an issue with trusting God. Maybe it's been super easy for you to always just view God as, the consummate friend and never leave you, never forsake you, like he's always been there, and you've never struggled with that. Others have, like it says here, have felt like, God, where were you? Where were you when this was going on? And the temptation is for all of us, the temptation is to feel like God let you down. He disappointed you. He wasn't who he said he was. He wasn't there when you needed him the most. And maybe it's when the prayer wasn't answered, right? Maybe when you're praying for God to heal yourself or to heal somebody else that you love, that healing didn't come, right? Maybe you've begged God to talk to you and all you've gotten is silence, right? You've been in pain. You've asked God to take it away, and you don't get the relief that you've prayed for. You've gone to get a promotion, or you've gone to get a better opportunity, and all you have felt is rejection. You pray, God, open this door for me. Like, I really want to go here. I really want to do this, and that door didn't open. And the temptation is, especially in the church, right? Growing up in the church, it's almost like you weren't allowed to have emotions. You weren't allowed to have feelings. You weren't really allowed, because if you said anything negative, then you lack faith, right? If you said anything negative, then you don't really know God, trust God, believe in God, whatever. And so the problem is that we, especially in the church, we just don't talk about it. And we just silently pull back, and it feels safer sometimes to not say anything than to be just blunt honest with our feelings. And when that happens, right, we have an enemy, and in those moments, the enemy whispers this subtle lie that, Jeremy, you can't really trust him with your heart. You can't really trust God. See, for me, growing up as a preacher's kid, growing up in the church, loving the people in the church, when I was, let me think, 16, this would have been May of 1992. Prior to 2 years prior to that, my dad, because of situation in my family, my dad went into a really deep depression while still pastoring. trying to hold himself all together, trying to hold the church all together, trying to hold a family all together. And on May 16th, on a Saturday, 1992, there was so if I don't know if you grew up in church or whatever, so you got the pastor, but then you got the board of deacons that maybe there's 6 or 8 deacons usually, depending on the size of the church, but 6 to 8 deacons usually, that, they have a monthly meeting. They talk about the finances of the church, situation in the church, whatever. Well, Saturday, May 16th of 1992, there was a secret meeting held by several of the deacons in our church. These deacons weren't overly fond of my dad, because with previous pastors prior to my dad, they'd always been able to control, always been able to manipulate, always be able to kind of maintain control of everything. They couldn't do that with my dad. When my dad was type A personality, and so he's very driven, very ambitious, very strong-willed, and very determined that he was going to do what he felt like God told him to do, and so he had a very strong backbone. Well, when the Depression came, deacons saw a window of opportunity to take advantage of that. And so they called a secret meeting of all the families of the church. There was 32 families on the membership roster. They called all of them into a meeting. And what they told those 32 families, 32, 33, whatever families, is that, hey, many of you know that Pastor Kleiniger has really been dealing with depression. And so we've got a petition here that we would like you to sign to call a special meeting with Pastor Kleiniger, just to check in on him, make sure he's doing okay. And so all 32 families, because they loved my dad, because they adored my dad, because he had been there when, their daughter had died, like Claudia is one that stands out. Like, this young lady had cystic fibrosis. She died. You would have think that would have been a very sad event. No, it was held in the church. And it was just a lot of praise and worship, a lot of just remembering. So what the message Dad preached was, yes, Claudia had CF, cystic fibrosis. That's what it was, cystic fibrosis. But now she has CF. She has Christ forever. And I mean, I was whatever, 10 or 11. And I still remember, like, the church just erupting. Like, the people of the church loved my dad. So anyway, the deacons had all 32 families sign this petition. All those families left the deacon's house. The deacons called my dad and said, Pastor Kleiniger. Now, my dad has been spending all day that Saturday preparing a message, as he always did, for that upcoming Sunday morning. They called him and said, Pastor Kleiniger, listen, we've had 32 families sign a petition stating they would like you to step down as pastor. Now, that is not what they told those families, but that's what they told my dad. And so my dad got up that very next morning and resigned under the auspice, or under the understanding, that those families wanted him to leave the church. And that was not true. Now, we didn't know that at the moment. We found out maybe a month or two later, weeks later, whatever it was. But as a 16-year-old boy, young man, it affected my faith, right? It affected my belief that I could trust God to take care of us. Now, God showed himself faithful. So then, because of the depression that my dad went through, things at home were, especially after he found that out, and right around that same time that this happened with the church, my dad battling depression, my grandma, his mom, comes to him and says, Steve, listen, my dad was 47 at the time. Steve, I've lied to you your whole life about who your real dad was or is. And she had told him it was this one man that she had been previously married to, when in fact it was an Italian soldier that had come in from Fort Knox, Kentucky, into Louisville, Kentucky. Grandma and him had been intimate a couple of times. She got pregnant. She never heard from this guy again. And she said, Steve, I believe his name was, and told Dad. And so to a man that was already spiraling, that just sent him down a deeper spiral. And again, there's a season of my life where I had to be a husband to my mom, a father to my dad, because he wasn't quite curling up in the fetal position, but he would often revert to this little boy puckering out his bottom lip. And as a 16, 17-year-old, 18-year-old boy and young man myself, having to carry the weight of that and having to ask myself, can I trust God to deliver? Right. And then I got to a point where I was dating my boy's mom, and just felt like, hey, I can do this better myself. I want to get out of this. She had an alcoholic stepdad that was, ripping phones out of the wall. And so we were like, hey, we can do this better ourselves. We got married. And then, 6 months into the marriage, she stopped taking her birth control and didn't tell me, because she wanted to get pregnant. And so that was another event in my life where I was like, felt betrayed, not by God, but again, looking to that. And then, going through a second divorce later on. That second marriage, we've been married 12 years, and she was unfaithful to me during that time. And so at the end of that, I was like, after that marriage, I was like, God, I'm done. Like I'm done. Try to do this your way. I'm going to do it my way. And I spiraled down. And it just really created this distrust in my heart that God was good, that God would deliver, especially like God, I lead worship, I preach, I'm in church, I'm serving your people, I'm doing all the things. And how in the world do you let this happen to me? And I just want to be real. Like, I all but threw up middle fingers to God saying, I'm done. I'm done with all this. I'm done doing it your way. And that was exactly what the screen says. I heard that whisper. Can you really trust him? Is he really good? And here's what happens is that when trust cracks, when our trust in God starts to crack, then control rises, right? And we start to think, you know what? I'll just figure out this myself. Like, I can't rely on you, God. I can't rely on anybody else. I'm just going to do this myself. And I've got to protect my own heart, God, because you have not protected me. You have not protected my heart. You've allowed me to get hurt, to get wounded, to get offended, to get betrayed. God, you've allowed this to happen. And thank God for the Bible, because we can go to God's word in Proverbs chapter 3, and we can find an answer to these questions that we're asking in those moments. Here's what Proverbs 3, 5-6 says. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all of your ways, submit to him, or in some versions say, acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. So trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all of your ways, acknowledge him or submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. So I'm like growing up in the church, and I love like digging into the Hebrew, which is what the Old Testament's written in, and the Greek is what the New Testament was written in. So let's look at the word trust in the Hebrew. Okay, is this word batak. And what it means in the Hebrew is to cling to confide in, to set one's hope and confidence upon. It's like a baby resting on its mother's chest. So trust in the Lord. Cling to the Lord. Confide in the Lord. Set your hope on the Lord. Set your confidence on the Lord. And he will make our paths straight. See, this is not a casual trust that is talking about. It is saying, okay, God, I'm going to put the full weight on you. I'm going to trust you fully. I'm going to trust you completely. And I love what it says there. It's not like walking out, because not like Janine, who had like 28 feet of snow, I think, right? Things are frozen up where she's at, okay? But it's not testing the ice with 1 foot, right? But standing on the rock with both feet. See, I mean, I'm trying to think in my life because I grew up in Kentucky until like all my life until I married Miranda, and I'm right over the river from Kentucky. I don't know that I've ever walked on like frozen water at all. Definitely did not walk on it if I wasn't sure that it could hold me up. I'm not testing the ice with my foot for sure. But I probably have done that with God, right? I probably have one foot in, one foot out. I probably, and especially in the moments where I wasn't sure because things weren't going the way I felt like they should or the way that I felt like He should have them go for me, and wasn't sure if I could trust Him. And I would dabble. I would kind of put my foot a little bit His direction, but most of my weight often was still leaning on myself. Um, and so I love this. When it says, lean not on your own understanding. See, here's the truth. Our perspective is limited, but God's perspective is eternal. I remember my dad preached a message years ago about a worm's eye view versus an eagle's uh, perspective, an eagle's eye view. Like to a worm, the grass, the blades of grass, everything is huge. It's overwhelming. It's insurmountable. Like that's the view of a worm. But the eagle, right? He's not 30,000 feet, but he's up there, right? He sees things in a much more smaller perspective, or his perspective is broader, but what he's seeing is smaller. And so one of the phrases that Miranda and I have learned through Bible studies and different things is this concept of upstairs versus downstairs thinking. When we think downstairs, everything is overwhelming. Everything is insurmountable, right? We can't trust anybody or anything. But when we look from God, how does God see this from His perspective as much as we can, and we start to see things rightly, right? So this situation, it seems like it's overwhelming. There's a reason Psalm 23 says, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. What does that mean? That means there's another side to the valley, and it's only a shadow. It's not actually death itself. It's just a shadow, right? And so there is that perspective of, I'm never going to get out of this valley, when God says, no, 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 it's just a season. This too will pass, right? You will come out on the other side because His perspective is eternal. So we look at trust in the Lord with all of our heart and lean not on our own understanding. Well, understanding there is this word bina. So don't lean on our own discernment. Don't, like, anybody is like critical analyzer, like you're so analytical about everything, right? That's me. I just, and truthfully, if I'm being honest, I'm all like, I don't want to be this way. But I'm often thinking, what's the worst thing that could happen? Like, what's the worst? Not thinking in faith. Often I'm thinking in fear, right? So I am leaning on my own understanding. I am trying to discern what's going to happen. I am trying to analyze it. I'm trying to make sense of this whole thing, and that it's basically essentially your mental framework for how life makes sense. It's not that eternal perspective, right? It's that limited perspective that we have. And that's that understanding that we don't need to lean on, but often we find ourselves doing it. And the temptation is to judge the entire book by a single chapter. But just because the chapter that you may be in right now is dark does not mean your story, my story, is over, right? And listen, we all have those dark times. And the temptation is, again, to think, I'm never going to come out on the other side of this thing. God, where are you? I'm in the valley of the shadow of death. Where are you? And sometimes it feels like He is a million miles away. It feels like He's not concerned about me or where I'm at or what I'm going through, right? It feels like He's silent. I'm screaming, I'm crying out. And yet it feels like, feelings are liars quite often, but feels like He's not listening. Feels like He doesn't care. Feels like He's never going to respond. And I'm judging His character, His nature, the whole book of who He is by this one moment that I'm in, and I'm questioning if He's actually good. if he's actually for me, if he's actually committed to my good. And I forget that Jeremiah 29:11, right? Probably know that scripture, you may or may not, but Jeremiah 29:11 says, for this is God talking, for I know the plans that I have for you. They're plans to prosper you, not to harm you, and they're plans to give you a hope-filled future. See, when we understand God's perspective, and it's eternal, but that his perspective is, hey, I know this doesn't feel like it's working out for your good, but I'm working behind the scenes. You don't know it yet, you don't see it yet, but I'm working, and we can trust him in that. And then again, it says, in all your ways acknowledge him. What does that word acknowledge there mean? And by the way, it's the Hebrew word yada, which means to intimately know, to recognize, and it's to invite God into the details of our life, into the details of what we're walking through, into the details of what we're experiencing, and give him permission to come in and sit with us in our pain, sit with us in our sorrow, sit with us in those moments. See, I want you to know, because I've had to learn, that it's safe to talk to him, right? Acknowledging him means talking to him about the disappointment in somebody else, or that we feel like we're disappointed in him, that he didn't show up, right? God, where were you? Where are you? And I don't think he's moved. I don't think he's offended by us just being honest, right? Because honesty is the beginning of healing. When we come into a place of absolute truth before God, see, I believe where truth is, God is. And where God is, transformation is possible. But we've got to start in that place of truth. And for me, what does that mean? That means I've got to lay down all this religious stuff that I've learned my whole life, right? And not lean on my own understanding and all the things that I've learned that are religious, that are performance-based, is probably a better way of saying that. And realizing that God doesn't just want me to know about him. He wants me to know him, for us to talk, for us to be in fellowship and communication, relationship together, and that he's actually near. Scripture says that God draws near to the brokenhearted. It says a broken and a contrite heart he will not despise. He will not turn away. God is okay with you just being blunt, honest with him. He's okay with me being blunt, honest with him, and saying things that the church would tell me, that's a no-no. You should never talk to God that way. Well, I don't think God's that fragile, right? I think he can handle what I have to say and what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling in the moment. And then it ends with that God is going to make our paths straight. Now look what it says. It doesn't say God will make our path easy. Not necessarily easy, but he will make our paths straight, which means he will make sure that your path and my path leads to somewhere good. There's a scripture, I forgot to look up the address before we got on here, but it says that God always leads us into a triumphant place. He's always going to lead us into a place of victory, into a place of triumph, into a place where we have overcome whatever it is that we've been facing. And so what that says to me is okay, does Jeremy always lead Jeremy into a triumphant place? No, nope, not at all. Not a chance. But God, if I'm following him, will always lead me to a place of victory, to a place of triumph, to a place of overcoming, to a place of a mountain peak where I can see it from his perspective and go, oh, I see what you did. I see how you used that horrible situation and either shifted something in me, right? You just used it. In Jeremiah, it talks about, I think it's chapter 18 or 19, but basically says, God is the potter, we are the clay. And the clay has no right to say to the potter, I don't want to be a pot. I don't want to be a plate. I don't want to be a bowl, right? But what it says in there is that he desires to make us into a vessel as he sees fit, Again, it's letting not leaning on our own understanding, taking our hands off, relinquishing control, and allowing God to use the situations in our life to shape and mold us into a vessel that He wants us to be. See, I believe for all of us, and maybe you've already had experiences where you've had an opportunity to look back when you've gone through the stuff, right? When you've gone through the mess and you're on the other side and you can look back and you can see how God held you during that time. And you can see how God's led you during that time. And you can begin to learn, if you've stopped feeling like you can trust Him, if we will take a moment and just allow that, sit in that moment of reflection and look back and go, did He really work this out for my good? Did He really show up, and was He working when I didn't even know He was there? When I didn't even know He was working on my behalf? Can I see how He was still working all these things together? Romans 8:28, God works all things together for our good, for those that love Him and are called according to His purpose. Like God is working things for our good. So let me ask you something. Are you willing to trust God with your disappointment? Are you willing to give that disappointment to Him? Are you willing to surrender your right to understand everything that's going on in your life? Are you willing to surrender your right to be right? That's a hard one. Am I willing to surrender my right that I've got to understand everything going on? I've got to relinquish control. Like, am I willing to give Him control? Am I willing to let whatever this is that I've held on to for so long? Am I willing to let it go? And maybe it is church hurt. Maybe you've been around Christians, right? People that say they love God, know God, follow God, and yet they've treated you worse than people that never stepped foot in a church, right? Are we willing to not judge God by other people, but are we willing to just sit with Him, relinquish our right to understand, willing to let that go and allow Him Himself to teach us who He is? See, I believe that trust is not a feeling. Trust is a choice. And the choice is to cling to God even when everything around me is dark, even when everything around me is falling apart, even when everything around me doesn't make a lick of sense. And I have to lay down that analytical side of my part of me. I have to lay down that sense of me that I need to take control again, right? Because God, I gave you permission, and you've let me down. You failed me. You didn't show up. And so now I'm going to take control back. And I did that. I told you probably, I can tell you when it was, probably 5 years ago, 4 years ago, where I was just like, forget you, God. I'm going to do this my way. Did not work out well, just in case you've been thinking of this whole time. Hey, wondered how that worked out. It did not work out. Until I came back to Him in 23. Yeah, 2020. Yeah, that's right. 2023. And then I met Miranda in March of 24. Right? We got married in October of 24, and here we are. But it was that second half of 23 that I was like, okay, fine. I'll head back your direction. And I had to choose to trust again. And do I still deal with it? Yeah, I do. I'm getting better. I'm getting closer. I'm learning to trust more and more. But again, it's weird to say, because He did nothing. But I had to get to a point where I felt like I needed to say, I forgive you, God. That's not even any theological person, any person of faith would go, okay, Jeremy, that didn't even, that's not even in the Bible. That doesn't make sense. But it's something I had to say in my heart. Not that He did anything, but I was holding resentment toward Him. I was holding unforgiveness toward God, and I had to relinquish that myself and just tell myself, He's good, He's trustworthy, He's for me, and yeah. So again, I just want to be real today. So what I want to do, I just want to take a moment here, and I want to ask you: is there one area that you can think about where you have stopped trusting God. Maybe he's got all these other parts of your life. Maybe you're good with trusting with this and this and this and this. But there's one area where you have held on to it like nobody's business. Like you've been afraid of that someone or something is going to take something sacred away from you, that God is going to take this away from you. And you've held on to it so tightly because of an offense, because of a wound, because of a past hurt. And you've not been willing to trust him with that one thing. Maybe everything else, but not that one thing. What is that for you? Because here's the good news. God is not finished with your story. God is not finished with my story. He is faithful. He is good. And he is here with you right now in the middle of the mess, in the middle of the pain, in the middle of the disappointment, in the middle of the offenses. God is right here with you, with me, and we can trust that he is good. So the challenge for this week is to answer that question. What is one area where I have stopped trusting God? And post that in the Facebook group. Now, if it's very private for you, then just say it's extremely personal. Like we're not going to ask you to just lay your life bare for all of us. But if you're willing to share that one area of your life where you have stopped trusting God and use that hashtag trust him in the Facebook group over this next week, share those things, but take that moment. Like maybe you don't need a moment. Maybe like Jeremy, the moment you started talking, I already knew why I don't trust God anymore. And he's okay with that. He is okay with you questioning, with you just processing that. But I do want to tell you, he's asking you, he's asking me to invite him in to our process and allow him not to control us, not to correct us, not to tell us we're wrong, not to condemn us, but just to sit with us and to process with us in those moments and show us that he is good and that he's for us. And that you have to be present next week to claim the prize. And replays, hashtag replay. Make sure if you watch the replay, if you're watching this replay, make sure you put hashtag replay in the comments along with hashtag trust him. And we'll make sure that we get you in the contest for next week. So, all right, I'm going to stop sharing here with anybody before we wrap up. Would anybody like to share anything that's on your heart? Okay. All right. Well, listen, thank you for being on here today and just joining with us during this talk today. And Miranda will be back with Mastery on Monday. Foundation, she'll be here next Wednesday. Excited to be with you all. We love you all so much. We're so grateful that God brought you into our life because every one of you are a gift. You're a treasure to us. We pray for you. We want and believe for God's best for you guys. Love you. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next week. See you. Bye-bye.